I love investing into ETFs, but at the same time, I also invest a lot into Bitcoin. Now, wouldn't it be great if there was a way to combine those two? And yes, the amazing thing from this year, we actually have quite big companies offering Bitcoin ETFs. And I got a lot of questions about this, how people can invest into Bitcoin ETFs. And that's why in this video, I really want to have a deep dive into the pros and cons of investing into a Bitcoin ETF instead of investing and owning Bitcoin yourself, as well as go through different ETF providers for Bitcoin that may be best for you, and ultimately show you how you can buy your first Bitcoin ETF. But first off, let's look into the pros of owning a Bitcoin ETF as opposed to owning the actual Bitcoin itself. Now, first off, you can really rest assured that they passed regulatory oversight, right? There was a long drama that took place in order to get US spot approved ETF on Bitcoin. It took a long time. We had future ETFs before, we had ETFs in Europe and what have you, but to have it approved in the US, an official Bitcoin ETF, and then have big companies like BlackRock and others jump on it, I think that gives it a lot of credibility and obviously regulatory oversight, which some of the crypto exchanges not necessarily have. Now, another big pro of owning Bitcoin through an ETF is the ease of access, right? I mean, storing Bitcoin, buying it on the exchange, then bringing it into your hardware wallet and making sure you keep all those seed phrases and passphrases safe. And a lot of people really feel overwhelmed and they find it too difficult. And in the end, they never buy Bitcoin and therefore miss out on the potential great opportunities it can offer, right? So buying a Bitcoin ETF is pretty much the same as buying an S&P 500 ETF, right? It's very simple. You buy it through your broker and you own it. You don't have to worry about, safe keeping those Bitcoins. Now, tax efficiency may depend on the country where you live. It might make more sense to buy through an ETF. But again, that very much depends on where you live. I live mostly in Dubai, so there's no tax on either the ETF or holding the Bitcoin. But in your case, it might make a difference. So definitely have a look into that as well. Now, in general, the pro of Bitcoin is undeniable. And I don't want to make a whole video about why you should potentially consider buying Bitcoin. But yeah, definitely it is a diversification, right? I own myself real estate. I have stocks, dividends, ETFs, but definitely Bitcoin is my biggest crypto holding. I have some other crypto as well, but mostly Bitcoin. And I really believe in it long term. And yes, it is another diversification to my investment portfolio. And the last pro is the custodial risk. Because as I said, some of those big exchanges where you buy crypto like FTX and Celsius in the past, they went bust, right? There was no oversight. They did what they did. It was a Wild West. And they went bust. And a lot of people lost a lot of their money in their crypto, obviously. And in this case, if you trust your money with asset managers like BlackRock and Fidelity, they are some of the biggest money managers in the world. They are definitely very much trustworthy and regulated. So, you have much less risk of trusting it with them rather than some company registered in the Seychelles or what have you that just operated a couple of years. And, there's a lot of question marks and lack of transparency. Now, of course, nothing in life only comes with pros. There might also be a few points to consider whether you should go for a Bitcoin ETF or actually own the Bitcoin yourself. The first one has to do with fees. And if you buy it through an exchange, the fees are really substantially less. And it's not an ongoing management fee. Here, you only have the fee when you buy it, but those ETFs charge you an ongoing fee like we have for any other ETF as well, right? On the S&P 500, for example, I pay 0.03%. That's extremely low. But as you see in a second, a lot of those ETF providers charge you upwards of 1 up to 2%, which is incredible and really takes away your returns. The second most obvious con is that you don't actually own the Bitcoin, right? And a lot of people really believe in Bitcoin as an alternative to fiat money, euro, dollar, and so forth in the future. And if you give it away for somebody else to hold on to, it's the equivalent of buying a house or apartment and giving it to someone and you never step foot inside and you can never actually live in there, right? You can't really do much with it. You just benefit from the price appreciation. Now, again, some people may like that, some don't. I personally like to hold on to my Bitcoin because I really believe in the future of it. And actually, right now, I can use it to pay certain things, right? In Dubai, I could technically buy an apartment with my Bitcoin. So if it was an ETF, I would have to sell it. Then there might be a taxable event. Then you have to take the fiat money, then send it over there. So having Bitcoin makes things much faster and easier. And I'm in control of it, not somebody else. But again, that's a personal preference. It's just something to keep in mind. Now, like any ETF, ETFs usually track some kind of index or basket of stocks, or in this case, of course, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin more specifically, and there might be tracking errors. So obviously, it's mimicking that price, so it doesn't go one-to-one every single second. So sometimes they might be a little bit off. So if it really is in a very bullish market, you might, here and there miss a couple of percentages. And lastly, you have limited trading hours because obviously those ETFs are traded like any stock on the stock market, Monday to Friday during trading hours. So while Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency can be traded 24/7, 365 days a year, anytime basically, the markets never close. here you definitely mostly trade during trading hours. Now, once again, some people like that, so they don't have to worry about it. But if there's a lot of action happening due to some news coming out on the weekend, you might want to sell or buy depending on the situation. You may not be able to really do that as well on an ETF. Then you could, if you did, for example, buy it through a crypto exchange, they could buy or sell anytime you wish. Right, with this, let's have a look at the biggest ETFs currently out there. Obviously, most of them are US based. They came on later on board. We had ETFs in other parts of the world for a long time, but as usual, US listed ETFs tend to have the most volume. You can see a total invested money. I mean, unbelievable numbers over there. The number one right now is, how else could it be, from BlackRock, and they only came on board in January this year. So really not that long. And already they have $21 billion in Bitcoin under management in that single ETF alone. So unbelievable. The ticker symbol is IBIT. Not so long ago, the biggest one was actually Grayscale, but I'll show you in a second, they dropped and had a lot of outflow. So that used to be much bigger, but a lot of people, sold their position in there and shifted into others, more specifically into the BlackRock one. And that's because of the fees. And I'll show you in a second what I mean by that, because the fees were extremely high. And then here you have some other well-known companies like Fidelity, ProShares as well, even ARK, Van Eck, Invesco. So more and more of the big players coming on board. So far, Vanguard doesn't have a Bitcoin ETF, but honestly, I'm pretty sure in a couple of years from now, we'll also see one from Vanguard. So now if I go over to the expense part, you can see why so many people left Grayscale, because they are now charging 1.5%. I mean, that's absolutely crazy money. It really goes straight out of your profitability. And BlackRock in return only charges 0.12%. Now they did say on their website that's only an introductory fee for the time being, and that from next year they will increase the fee to 0.25%. So obviously a bit higher than it is right now, but still compared to Grayscale, significantly cheaper, and cheaper still than many others. And here you really know that you're with a trusted player. But when we look, for example, for the 1 month return, you can see that the BlackRock one really outperformed quite a few of the other ones, especially of course because of the lower expense ratio. That also helps the return. But then we also go back to the tracking error. They might be better tracking than some of the other players out there. So these are all points to consider for any ETF in general, but also for a Bitcoin ETF for sure. And another really interesting chart for me to look at regularly is the total Bitcoin net inflow of money basically flowing into those Bitcoin ETFs, right? You can see here the daily net inflow in one single day is over 100 million. I mean, that's crazy money going into those ETFs. And the total net assets in those ETFs are currently 60 billion. I mean, you can really see they're getting more and more popular. Obviously, you have certain days when there's also outflows. That's normal, right? Because a lot of people move in and out. But overall, you see a stronger tendency of people pouring the money into those ETFs. And I think rightfully so, because as I said, a lot of elderly people or people not comfortable with technology necessarily, they don't want to have to fiddle around opening up a crypto exchange, then buying it over there, changing it into another cryptocurrency, then maybe withdrawing it to their Ledger hardware wallet. As I said, try to look after those passwords, that they're in different places, that they're secure and what have you. So it can be really overwhelming. So a lot of people don't want to have to deal with it. They know how to buy stocks and ETFs, and they want to do same with Bitcoin because they want to benefit from the price appreciation potential in the future. And I think for that, it's a great opportunity. Now you may ask yourself, Kai, how do I buy my first Bitcoin ETF? Unfortunately, at this stage, non-US citizens cannot really buy into those ETFs because of various regulations. The same how we cannot buy VOO, the S&P 500 ETF directly listed in the US. Instead, we have to buy UCITS, UCITS ETFs that are based and domiciled in Ireland, and only those we can buy. So for now, we don't have such a version of the IBIT right here in Europe. So the only options you can actually buy are CFDs based on that Bitcoin ETF, which honestly kind of defeats the purpose because here you're speculating on already a speculative asset. To see, for example, on Trading 212, if you try to buy it, you will find it over here, iShares Bitcoin Trust, IBIT, but you cannot actually buy it because as it says over here, it's actually an ETF CFD. So you would then have to go into the CFD part of Trading 212. And here you can see I could either short it by selling it or buying more of it. And from there, I don't have money yet here, I could buy it. But that's a CFD on already a speculative asset, and then often still using leverage and margin and what have you. So I'm really not a big fan of doing that, and I really would not recommend doing this. The same on Interactive Brokers, my stockbroker of choice, where I have my biggest part of my portfolio. If I look for IBIT over here, I will find it. You can see listed on NASDAQ. I can find the stock over here. I get all the information, but if I want to try to buy it, you will see I don't have the permissions. So I know some stockbrokers are offering this Bitcoin, but in most cases, as I said, those will be CFDs. That means you don't actually own the underlying share. So you're basically buying a promise on the promise of owning Bitcoin, which ultimately for me, once again, confirms that it's probably better for you to buy Bitcoin outright yourself. So if you wanted to buy some of those ETFs, unfortunately, you can't really buy those listed in the US right now, then you can just go over to Just ETF over here, which is a great resource to find an ETF. And here we'll find kind of European-based ETFs at this stage. Of course, you can see the fund size is significantly smaller, and yeah, the selection is much less, and the expense fee is generally quite high. But for example, you could go with Van Eck, which is a big trusted player in the space as well. You can see based in Liechtenstein. So you can click into this over here, and you will be seeing, if I click on stock exchanges, here see the ticker symbols. So if I take the ticker symbol over here, VBTC, if I now go back over to Trading 212, look up VBTC, I will see Van Eck Bitcoin over here listed in either Germany or Amsterdam. I can choose where to buy, let's say Germany. And from here, I can go ahead and buy that Bitcoin. So you will see if I click on buy, you will see it's actually an exchange traded product, not an exchange. So you see, it's not very easy to do at this stage. You can buy it, but for me right now, it feels a little bit clunky and cumbersome to do so. And it's almost like, buying an apartment, but then instead of, renting it out, you're actually giving it away to a stock manager and buying stocks that hopefully appreciate based on your apartment's value, which kind of is counterintuitive. So again, while it's still a little bit complicated, it's expensive and I don't own it, I'm just not the biggest fan of doing that way. There is opportunities depending on where you live and which broker you use. Most of them are CFD based or ETP based. So yeah, it's not very organic. I think it will get easier and easier as we go along. There will be eventually, I suppose, UCITS version of that as well. But these for now are the options if you really want to have a Bitcoin ETF. Now, as for myself, I will actually continue buying the real deal, the real Bitcoin. For me, there's just so many more benefits of owning it myself, in addition to being much cheaper. Even when I look at it as little as 0.25%, in the grand scheme of things, over time, this still adds up a lot and goes out of my returns. So I will make sure I save on this as well as take self-custody. I enjoy the process, and I think once you've done it once on platforms like Nexo, which is the platform I use mostly to buy my Bitcoin, it's super simple to use. Honestly, I really love it. It's very easy. And once I bought the Bitcoin over here, I then basically send it to my own hardware wallet and take self-custody. So I'm in control of my own Bitcoin. I think that's the beauty of it, because with money, I have to leave it at the bank. It's not the smartest to keep it in the house, but Bitcoin, you can technically remember 24 words in your head. And with that, you can live anywhere in the world and you can unlock that money. Nobody can take it away from you. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. That's why I love it. And I think that's the power of it. And if you want to get started buying your first Bitcoin, then sign up with Nexo with my link and you'll be getting $25 worth of free Bitcoin. Next up, check out this video over here. As always, thanks a lot for watching. Stay healthy, get wealthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.